She was the chapter no one knew, older woman revealed. They said every king has a secret chapter in his story, a chapter that no one dares to turn, no one truly understands. For Sheikh Hamdan, the world's beloved poet and crown prince of Dubai, that hidden chapter had a name, and it belonged to a woman older than him, wiser than most, and mysterious as the desert moon. It began quietly, long before the cameras, before fame, before his verses became the voice of every lover who had ever burned in silence. He met her not at a royal event or a glittering gala, but somewhere simpler, in a library filled with forgotten books, where her fingers traced words like they were alive. She wasn't like anyone he had known. She didn't chase attention. She didn't bow to titles. Her eyes carried both peace and storm, the kind that could make a prince forget his crown. She was older, yes, but in her presence, age became meaningless. She spoke like time itself had stopped for her, and when she smiled, the world seemed softer. Hamdan had always written about love, its power, its pain, its patience. But around her, he didn't need words. She was poetry standing in front of him, raw, real, and rare. The more he listened, the more he realized she had lived the verses he only dreamed of writing. Rumors would later call her the woman who changed him, but no one truly knew what she gave him: peace. She taught him that silence was not emptiness, that stillness could hold stories. She reminded him that the greatest love stories are not always loud, but quiet, written between moments, in the spaces between words. One evening, as the Dubai sun melted into gold, she told him, "Your destiny is larger than love, but love will shape it." Those words stayed with him, carved deep into his heart, even when distance and duty pulled them apart. When she left, she didn't leave traces, no letters, no pictures, no goodbye. Just a verse written in his diary, one the world would one day read without knowing who inspired it. She walked into my silence and it became music. Years passed. The crown prince became a symbol of grace, strength, and poetry. Yet every time he wrote about a woman whose soul could calm storms, those who knew him saw something in his eyes, a softness that wasn't always there before. They asked, "Who is she?" He smiled, never answering. Because some love stories are not meant to be owned. They're meant to be remembered. And so she remained the chapter no one knew, until now. Behind his public life and royal duties, there existed memories he could never replace. She wasn't his scandal, nor his secret. She was his teacher, his mirror, his muse. She revealed to him that love doesn't always end in forever, but in understanding. Every poet has a beginning, but the world rarely sees what inspired the first poem. For Sheikh Hamdan, that beginning was her, the woman older than time, wiser than youth and purer than fame. Now whispers return to Dubai's golden. Her name was Layla, not the one from songs or legends, but real, with the kind of quiet strength that made people turn twice without knowing why. She wasn't from royalty, yet she carried herself with a grace no crown could give. She was an art curator in an old Dubai gallery, a place where forgotten paintings breathed again. And that's where Sheikh Hamdan had first seen her, standing before a canvas like she was speaking to it. At first, he watched her from a distance. There was something in her that reminded him of the desert at dusk, calm on the surface but alive underneath. He began visiting the gallery often, disguised and unnoticed. Sometimes they talked about art, sometimes about silence. She didn't treat him like a prince, and perhaps that's what drew him closer. She spoke to him like a man, not a name. Layla was 15 years older, but her spirit felt young. Her laughter was unfiltered, her words honest, her silence peaceful. She had loved and lost before, and it had softened her, not broken her. "You will learn," she once told him, "that love doesn't always come to complete you. Sometimes it comes to teach you who you are." Hamdan would return to the palace and write until dawn, his poetry blooming with new life. The people of Dubai began to notice the change. His verses were no longer about dreams. They were about depth, about eyes that had seen too much and still chose to love. But behind that poetry was Layla, the woman who had made him see beauty not as fame, but as truth. They met in secret places, away from the palace lights. In the desert, under skies full of stars, they talked for hours. He told her things he never told anyone, his fears, his doubts, his longing to be more than a title, and she listened, like only someone who had lived could listen. One night, as the wind whispered through the dunes, he said, "Layla, the world would never understand this." She smiled, her voice calm. "The world doesn't need to. Some love isn't made for the world. It's made for the soul." Their bond deepened, not through touch or promise, but through understanding. Yet time was not kind to them. Rumors began to circle. A mysterious woman seen with the prince, a name whispered in private halls. Layla knew what such stories could cost him. "You have a kingdom to serve," she said softly one evening, as the city lights shimmered in her eyes, "and I have a silence to keep." He shook his head, desperate. "Don't make this sound like an ending." "It's not an ending," she replied. "It's just the part where love turns into strength." The next day she was gone. No message, no trace, only a single envelope in his favorite book at the gallery. Inside was a note in her handwriting. "When you write of love, write it free. Don't write my name, write my soul." From that day, every poem he wrote carried a whisper of her. Every time he spoke of love in his verses, she was there, unseen but felt. Dubai's poet prince became a voice for the timeless. 4 years passed. Dubai changed. The skyline reached higher, and so did Sheikh Hamdan's legacy. But in the quiet of his private study, beneath shelves filled with books and journals, a wooden box remained locked, untouched by time. Inside it lay the memories of Layla. He had written thousands of verses since she left, each carrying a trace of her, the warmth of her voice, the wisdom in her silence, the ache of her absence. Yet no one knew that every love poem he ever published had begun in that hidden box, where her last note still rested, folded and fading. One evening, as rain gently touched the palace windows, Hamdan's younger sister Fatima found him sitting with an old notebook. She had always admired his poetry, but she had never seen that one before. Its cover was worn, its pages yellowed. "What's this one called?" she asked. He looked up, his eyes distant. "The chapter no one knew." She smiled softly. "Is it about her?" He hesitated, and then nodded. "Yes, It's about the woman who taught me what love really is. Fatima listened as he read aloud verses never shared with the world. Words carved with devotion, pain, and gratitude. She came not to stay, but to awaken. Not to promise, but to teach. And when she left, the silence she left behind spoke louder than her voice. Tears filled Fatima's eyes. "People should read this," she whispered. "They deserve to know what inspired your words." But Hamdan shook his head. Some stories lose their magic when the world owns them. She was never meant to be a rumor. She was meant to be remembered quietly. And so for years her name remained hidden, until fate decided otherwise. After Hamdan's poetry collection Echoes of the Desert was released, one reader noticed something unusual. Every poem contained a single recurring word. Layla. Hidden in the margins, in metaphors, and even in the initials of his verses. It didn't take long before the world began to wonder. Who was Layla? Social media lit up. Journalists searched. Historians speculated. Some said she was a myth he created. Others believed she was the muse behind his most haunting works. But the truth was quieter than all the noise. She had been real. She had been the chapter no one dared to turn. One day, Hamdan visited that same old gallery where he had first met her. It had aged, just like the paintings. He stood before the same canvas, the one she used to stand before. And for a moment, he felt her presence again. "You were right," he murmured into the silence. "Some love is made for the soul." He left a white rose on the bench where she once sat, and a note for anyone who might find it. Not every love story ends with forever. Some end with truth, and truth never fades. Months later, the gallery curator discovered something unexpected, an old sketchbook tucked behind the painting. Inside were Layla's sketches, signed with her name and dated the same year she met the prince. The world finally saw her art and through it her spirit. News.